Welcome to the Robinson Hewitt Pod. We're here to talk about the anthropology of technology. I'm your host, Alison Mackie. I am the founder of Robinson Hewitt Consulting. I'm an awarded governance director, a futurist, and anthropologist. I'm here to help build the next era of technology and make it really fun and accessible for everybody so that we can have this thing that people keep talking about in the tech industry of the human in the loop, right? Okay, so if you are watching on YouTube, I'm going to do things a little bit differently today. I'm going to make this more of like a classroom setting. So we are going to be sharing a screen. I want you to take notes. I want you to start implementing these into your daily life today. If you are watching on Spotify or listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, then we will be posting a blog post with everything that you need to help build the next era. So let's get into it. Here we go, the next era of fashion and textiles, the anthropology of technology. Welcome. So today we're going to go on a journey. We are reframing fashion. We're thinking about how fashion reflects technological and cultural shifts through form and function. We'll be then thinking about this from an anthropological perspective. We're thinking about clothing as identity, its energy, and how it impacts culture, understanding how it impacts our behavior, emotion, and social meaning. We'll then be talking a little bit of technology in a really fun, easy way, changing fabric. We're going to be exploring how new materials and smart textiles are redefining function and experience. We're going to be thinking about a few future scenarios, thinking about responsive and programmable clothing, thinking about materials that can adapt, respond, and evolve with the wearer. Talking then again about the social impact of all of this, talking about access, sustainability, and dignity, looking at these from different use cases and things like that. And then we're going to be finally taking this to the road, thinking about strategic thinking and designing for the next era. So this is going to be where we take all these ideas and start thinking about how we can start building the next era today. So reframing fashion. Fashion is one of those first places where technological change shows up. If you look throughout time, you will always see that whatever is happening technologically, our fashion will always match what is happening with that. It is a mirror, right? It's not just about survival, it is also about our self-expression as well and what we need our clothing to do for us. So, as we're mentioning this, clothing always sits between form and function. It has to work for the body and the environment, the roles people play, as well as being a reflection and communicating our identity, culture, and our status. So I really love this example of in World War II, we can see this tension play out in real time, and our clothing had to become incredibly practical for women. So this is when our men went off to war, they got drafted, and women then, they were like, oh no, who's going to be in the factories? Oh, we have this like whole unused part of society. Let's get women into the factories. And so we started to see this shift of women wearing overalls, and our clothing became a lot more boyish and practical. We could do more things. Even the Queen of England started to wear really masculine clothing, well, masculine at the time clothing, so that she could drive around in a little like Land Rovers. I think that's so cute. Anyways, then post-war, when it was I guess, safe for us to return back to the kitchens, our clothing then became more restrictive and performative in its styles. But with that, I think it's like also shows like really beautiful style. But anyways, I digress. So what I'm saying with this is that every era, if we take this like one little moment as an example, we have our own materials and silhouettes that come out of it. And it's always shaped by our needs and the possibility that we are seeing. Another example I want to bring up is the Bauhaus. For those that aren't well versed, the Bauhaus was this architectural and design school in Germany back in the 1910s. It was incredibly like just go have a deep dive on your own. It is incredible, but they would take different architectural designs, materials, things like that, and really expand it and bring it out. They would host these really lavish, fun parties, and they would dress up, and they would really take all of their design thinking and put it into their clothing. This clothing, these sorts of fashion designs that they were doing for the Bauhaus have trickled throughout time and have really made a huge impact in the fashion industry ever since. If you look at 1960s, where we had futuristic idealism, we were thinking about the space race and all that sort of stuff, we really leaned on the Bauhaus designs to be what we would think about in terms of like the future of fashion and what we would need in terms of like spacesuits and things like that. We also see that being trickled into this idea in the 2000s when we had another resurgence of this like futuristic idealism and you know, this the whole like glitter pop future technology was starting to be shown again. These, if you actually look back in time, you can see this pattern kind of follow itself of design, materials, fashion, and futurism. All of these things of thinking about the potential, it was shown through fashion. And I don't know, I just think if you can go and have like a look and a deep dive into fashion of the Bauhaus, it is incredible. I would highly recommend it. But what we're saying at the end of this is that fashion doesn't just follow technology, but it is translated into something wearable and tangible. It is an expression of what we are experimenting with when it comes to technology. And I just think it's beautiful and I love it so much. Anyways, moving on. Clothing as identity, energy, and culture. Thinking about this from a little bit of an anthropological perspective. So we know that clothing reflects society as a whole and where we're at. It reflects our economic conditions, our values, and our beliefs. So a lot of cultures adorn themselves for spiritual reasons, their religious beliefs. There's, all throughout time, we have had clothing reflect to us different stages of our lives, for ceremonies, things like that. But also, if you go right to the beginning, it is all about protection and keeping us warm. And I mean, I don't have to go too deep into that. I think we all know that. But when we think about survival mode in society or just in the evolution of being human, we know that clothing is functional. And when we come into more stable societies or groupings of humans, we can start to see this expression coming through an identity, our status, where we rank within society, as well as meaning for things. So, for me personally, like this little necklace that I wear means a lot to me, but to somebody else, it might be not seen as valuable. That sort of thing starts to come through when we have a stable society. So here we also have this thing of like how clothes affect how we feel and how we move within society as well. So we have different types of textures, pressure points when it comes to fashion as well. The temperature all interacts with our nervous system. So this is kind of where I want to kind of bring in something a little bit more a left of field, I guess. Coming from someone that's like neurospicy, you can feel like textures of clothing so much more like the hypersensitivity of it. I don't know, there's something about clothing and energy that you can just like feel it. And you can feel when something isn't quite right on your body or, we're just drawn to certain things, right? And this is where I think symbolism when it comes to clothing really matters. So we have things like wedding dresses. As I mentioned, we go through these different eras of life and these stages of life rituals, and clothing is part of that. We also have uniforms, so school uniforms, work uniforms. There's part of our identity and our culture. And for me personally, I use fashion as a way to kind of reset my identity sometimes. So if I go through different eras of my life, I usually tend to like fall back on a white t-shirt and blue denim jeans when I'm kind of going through this, I don't know, I guess like a restructuring of self or when I'm in transition. And I think it can really shape your behavior and your emotional state as well. The thing is, designers understand this, and as a consumer as well, when you enter into a store, or if it's something like Zara, or if you enter into like a little boutique design store, you can feel the difference. You can feel the energy of the clothing, and I think as time goes on, as we have more awareness of this, as a consumer, you can start to pick up on the energy of the clothing itself. And I've seen TikToks like recently and other videos of people really looking at the materials of things and questioning, hey, this is like from an XYZ designer, but I'm feeling it and it's synthetic. Why is it at this price point? Where's the sustainability behind this, right? We're having this awareness of production ethics and sustainability, which does add a whole new layer to our experience when it comes to fashion. We are starting to notice when something feels off with a piece of clothing, even if to the untrained eye, you know, it looks fine. You can feel it when you enter a store. And I think this is why, you know, a lot of stores have very specific marketing and advertisements when it comes to this. You know, they're experts at this. What's the layout of the store? What's the music that's playing? You know, what's the sort of vibe? You know, you can think about that with Brandy Melville with, you know, the one size fits all approach and, you know, the aesthetics, or Abercrombie and Fitch with like the, you know, the black and white and like the naked models, right? Like there's advertisement with this. We're starting to see through it and starting to look closer as a consumer, looking at things from a new perspective and its energy. That's the missing piece at the moment, I think. So when I'm talking about this, I'm mainly talking about the materials, not necessarily about design, because I think that's very subjective. I'm talking about something a little bit more objective, and that's materials and how we're seeing this change when it comes from a technological perspective. So materials, as I mentioned, they're never neutral. They reflect the technology that created them. And I want to talk about this as well, of like the revolutions and evolutions of society and humans and culture. So like if we think about cotton and linen, that was mainly, and silk as well. That was like a whole reflection of and not industrial revolutions, but more agricultural revolutions and things like that. Really needing something soft, durable, and accessible. And yeah, anyways. And then also talking about denim as well, needed something a little bit more hard wearing, something that could be worn a million times and, you know, still be hard wearing. That's denim for you. Then we're moving into this like mass production of, you know, petrochemicals and synthetics and, you know, unnatural fibers, you know, that we can see with this mass production and fast fashion. So there's evolutions and changes to that. There's this currently we're at the space of having desire for more because we have access to more. However, I think things are changing, and I'm starting to see a lot more of these sort of emerging fabrics come out. So they're more self-cleaning. We have temperature regulating, antimicrobial, and energy conductive materials that are behaving more like systems than just like, I guess it would be like less static, but there is like something that goes beyond this. So at the moment, I would consider this like a type of nanotechnology where we're getting to something that is so microscopic. We are no longer looking at things that are just taking fibers and working with them as its form. We are getting down to nano spaces, right? We're talking about things from a molecular standpoint rather than just what you can do with hands and machinery. We're getting right down to the nitty-gritty of things. And this allows us, getting down to this nano space, we are able to build and work with fabrics that can respond to things, they can adapt and maybe even repair themselves. We are seeing this quite clearly with like fabrics that are like non-creasing. And this isn't specifically, I wouldn't necessarily call it like fully synthetic, like it would be like a petroleum-based synthetic material. It's something else completely different to that. But what if these technologies and nanotechnologies and materials? So, okay, so as a way of background, everything that I talk about, I usually build it off the back of the idea that general AI is already around. We've already gone through, like, you know, is it bad for us? Is it good for us? We're at a good space when it comes to artificial intelligence. And if you know my work, you know that I believe that there should be two streams of artificial intelligence, one as a tool and one as agents. Give agents autonomy to flow and function as it needs to. And we have AI tools for, you know, synthesizing data and things like that. That's a whole other conversation. I have videos on that. If you're interested in understanding the future of AI, I have that there. But if we can start to think about artificially intelligent and nanotechnological materials, we can think about things in a way that clothing isn't just static. It can be programmable and it can change appearance, function, and even the feel of it as well. Um, this kind of started a couple of years ago. I used to be friends with someone that was so into NFTs, and they would always be talking about the potential of NFTs. If you don't know what an NFT is, it's a blockchain-based sort of application of a non-fungible token. So basically what it does, and it's very basic, like non-crypto bro sort of description. It's basically just like a decentralized certificate of ownership of a digital type asset. Very basic understanding of that. But basically, what you can do is have ownership of something on the internet. And this kind of paved the way for things like thinking of the Web3, where things are decentralized, you have ownership of things on the internet. Anyways, if you think about that, we used to have these conversations about what was the potential of the digital layer of fashion and, integrating this with like VR and, virtual reality, augmented reality, and having fashion shows where you could have glasses and project different types of fashion and be able to do things digitally. And that got me thinking of, well, what if it isn't a hologram? What if it isn't, material? What if it isn't a digital space? What if we can still have that in real life, something that's tangible, you can actually touch and feel, and it's human and it's real? And that's where I thought about this idea of if we could get nanotechnology down to the space where we can actually, embed it and program it with, a high level intelligence system that can respond to a human needs or, respond to us and be part of us and be almost like a second skin. I think there's something there, and I kind of want to dive into that a little bit more. So let's think about this in a future perspective. So we're thinking about responsive and programmable clothing here. So imagine fabrics that can adapt to your body and environment with temperature, texture, color, and support. So I want to take this example in sportswear because I feel like this is a really great example of like an Aura ring, the technology behind an Aura ring, right? It collects data about you and like your heart rate and all that good stuff, all that really great data that we love, right? And having this like sort of wearable tech, and it gives you information. What if there was almost like a lycra or a second skin sort of approach where we had material that could automatically tell us where in our body things were happening, or, collect data on our sweat, or um, I don't want to go, I'm not an expert in that, so I don't want to like make assumptions. But that's the sort of thinking that I have with this. And, we already see this in like applications that can be seen beyond just fashion industry and sportswear specifically. I'm really thinking that this could be useful in the medical space, things in aging care, pregnancies as well as PPE. I had this when I was thinking about this whole idea, I was thinking about PPE, so that's like protective gear, and one example I had in my head was in surgeries, right? We spend so much time, or I don't, but like doctors spend so much time scrubbing up and getting ready and being really protective. So what if there is a leakage of something, right? What if, they cut themselves or, something becomes exposed? We could be able to tell through fabric. It could light up or alert being like, oh, something's happening here. We need to like take extra precautions, things like that. And I think about this as well from a sort of a dignity perspective as well. Um, I know that there's like a lot of people that are currently going through sort of, bowel cancers, things like that. They were seeing a huge rise in that. And what if there was a way to, bring dignity back to people and help them live better lives through things like that? And having beautiful wares that can incorporate, stoma bags, or I don't know, I'm just like throwing ideas out there. But there was another thought I also had was, I suffer from endometriosis, and some days clothing is just like, oh my God, having to look after my little Edwina that I call her, my endometrioma, and, having to have heat packs or ice packs to like change up with like if I'm dealing with inflammation or, you know, that sort of thing. Being able to adjust, and as well as I'm thinking about pregnancy here as well, being able to grow with a big belly and things like that. I don't know. I think there's a couple of really cool things that we could do with like programmable fabrics that adjust to us. And with this thinking, I think that clothing then can become a system that is responsive, adaptable, and can integrate into daily life. And it's not just like one object that you have hanging in your wardrobe. It's something that has meaning beyond, and purpose beyond just something you wear. So, thinking about the social impact of all of this and what this could do in terms of access, sustainability, and talking more about dignity. So, impact of materials totally depends on its context. So, we see this in developed and wealthier regions across the world that clothing is about identity, and other places it can just be about basic human dignity. And again, that's going into this idea of if a society is stable, we, have space to be able to use fashion as something that reflects our identity. But we are starting to see more and more that we need clothing for basic dignity and for survival, to keep warm, to keep us feeling comfortable. I think it's one of those things of it's nice to have nice things, but at the end of the day, it is best to be comfortable. And so if we can have clothing that is and materials that is responsive, have this durability to it, it can improve the stability. It can help reduce waste and help enhance longevity of clothing. We hopefully won't be able to see this, fast fashion and wasteful spending and wasteful materials and resources. So we have programmable clothing. It allows for this flexibility without excess, and it can meet a lot of multiple needs at the same time as being, I don't know, just still being able to have form and function. So again, going back to programmable clothing is like another side that's not just about like, collecting data and things, but being able to repair itself and be like, oh, like stitch it in here or like, compress hair or lift hair or even changing colors and patterns and being really bespoke for you. I think, going into this idea, it's early applications in healthcare can show how clothing can monitor and respond to us, supporting the body through life stages. And I just think of this idea of like, it's how do you blend both of form and function? So how do we design this for the next era? And I think if we look beyond, designers and innovators thinking beyond just style, it's just focusing on what materials are and how we can make this possible. I think I do think there is this like move towards more softer materials at the moment. Like most of my clothing is cotton or linen, or if it's something I really like, then it will be synthetic. But usually, typically, I tend to go to denim, 100% or linen. But I think if, in terms of like sportswear, I would love something that was a little bit more, if it was supposed to be synthetic, something a little bit gives me more bang for my buck rather than just something that's like feels off, right? So, how can we explore new fibers and textures and thinking about responsive materials that allow for new designs to be able to shift and adapt over time? And I think if you're thinking about this so I'm thinking about this from two perspectives, one from a designer's perspective and one from a consumer's. But first, if we think about this from strategic design perspective, it means thinking about durability. So that's in your designs, making sure that you keep function and something that can adapt over time. I really think about the capsule wardrobe and how, um, you know, brands like the Row just kind of had that nailed down of like getting the basics right and then being able to build on top of that. Something about value circulation is like really key to keep in mind as well. So continue to create value with your products and with your designs that can move through different contexts. I think that's again go back to capsule wardrobes, a great example of that. Also, understanding systems awareness. I think we're seeing like so many great boutique brands really nailing this, and that's having great materials, really, really transparent supply chains, understanding user behavior and the environments that they are connecting with, and kind of giving back to that. realizing that they are part of a circular whole instead of just like, an end stop, right? And this, again, thinking about feedback loops, understanding where the decision making is close to context and being able to adjust with that. I think the days of just being a designer and designing for the sake of it is no longer necessary. I think understanding that they're part of someone's story and someone's journey, right? Like, I remember buying one of my first coats and I saved up for it. And it was just one of those big, remarkable moments of being able to go into a store that, I'd never been able to, afford before, and having that coat be part of my journey and being able to put it on and wear it. That's the sort of thing we need to be thinking about, is this decision making of being part of people's lives and the energy that you put towards that as well. So I think in terms of designing for the next era, I think this is a really great opportunity to kind of contribute to the shift and not wait for it. I think, it's all well and good to be like, oh yeah, in the future we're going to be having these spacesuits and, they're going to be temperature controlled and not going to have to worry about getting things tailored. It will be tailor-made to me through a program. I think it's more about thinking about what could clothing do if you really let it? And what would you build if the materials weren't the limitation? And I think the number one thing to remember moving forward in designs or even as a consumer is the energy. And I think that's the thing of like, how does it feel? How does it respond to you? And okay, so there is this experiment done a couple of years ago on water. And if you talked sweet nothings to the water, it actually responded to it. And it became healthy water. And if you said negative things to the water, it went moldy and gross and stagnant and stale. And I think it's the same thing with materials. If we can, I don't know, I think there's something there though, in terms of energy and creating for the future. I'm not saying like go out and like, throw all your money into figuring out nanotechnology. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just thinking like, doing things that are strategically in alignment to that, thinking about how does this help with dignity? How does this help in different contexts? And yeah, what would you design if your energy spoke for it? So that is today's podcast episode. I hope you enjoyed it. You can find more about Robinson-Hewitt Consulting. We are here to build the next era. We work at the intersection of anthropology, emerging technology, and long-term systems change to help future-facing leaders transform, evolve, and build the next era. You can start your journey with us. We have so many free resources available on our website, all available to help build the future. That goes into telling your own founder's journey, thinking about the future systems framework, as well as paintings to inspire. That's another fun one that I have on the website. So if you're ready to take the leap, we have a few services available, helping with strategic redesigns or even just retainers or workshops. But be inspired and transform. You can visit our website for more resources, insights, and next steps. And if you enjoyed today's video, if you're on YouTube, please give this a subscribe and a like. Let me know what you're working on in the comments. And if you're on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please give this a follow and share this with a friend who might be designing for the future, because you never know, you might just be the one that could give them the nudge to build something amazing. And I will see you in the next one. Ciao.